Good morning, everybody. Let me fix my hood. Sorry. A little chilly out this morning. Okay. This week, we're going to start vegetables, which is a massive chapter. We're going to break it up into three categories. We're going to start out with, we're going to separate the types of vegetables for one day for today. We'll do the other types of vegetables tomorrow. Then Wednesday, we'll go over how to clean them, store them, cut them, and then we'll do applications. There's so many applications for these things. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So let me move this stuff around a little bit. Hopefully this doesn't lock up again. That's the goal. All right. Okay, we'll just kind of start out. My computer is not liking me these days. Okay. Here we go. All right, so vegetables. Just to start out with them, there's so many different types. Basically, so the types and markets forms. There's edible, herb-like plant. The edible parts is how they categorize these, okay? So is the leaves, fruit, stems, roots, tubers, seeds, and flowers. So whatever part of the plant you eat is what category it goes into. Usually eaten cooked, but you can eat these raw. Honestly, to get the most beneficial substances from your fruits and vegetables, like to be most nutritious, is in its rawest form. Just because the more you cook something, the more the vitamins, minerals, and plant proteins, the plant protein or cells break down, even the more you wash it. So if you wash tomatoes, or if you wash carrots, like you peel carrots and soak them, vitamins and minerals are coming out. Like look at the water when you soak a carrot, it turns orange. So that's part of the vitamins and minerals. Okay, so flower members, these are a flower member. Oh good, my picture did go in. These are flowering plants. So that includes broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, all right? These are known for having a lot of cancer preventing chemicals in them. So we'll get into that more when we start talking about breaking them down and cooking them and stuff like that. And then usually cook the head of the vegetable, depending on what you're cooking. And then, like it says, avoid rubbery texture and dark spots. You can tell that especially with cabbage. You'll want to peel this. You'll want to look through here and peel off any sort of leaves that are browning or turning different colors. And then a lot of times the outer layer is the most rubbery, and you don't want to try to eat that part. So you always want to peel it, okay? I'll show you that when we get to buying cabbage. Okay, so broccoli. There's three main types of broccoli that you're going to see. This is the standard type right here. This is just a head of broccoli, which you can eat, which I have a video for you. You're going to watch on this too. You can eat the flower, and then you can actually eat the stalk, but you need to clean it. You need to peel out that outer layer until you get to the white part in the middle that's very soft and fleshy, and then you can cook it. This is called broccoli rabe, and this is called rapini. This one is more like a green. You see the little head of broccoli right here, but you cook this whole thing. And then this one over here, you can eat the whole thing as well. So let's try to do that. We'll do the video after this, just so my computer doesn't lock up. The next one is Brussels sprouts. If you've never seen a Brussels sprout grow, this is a Brussels sprout plant. Some restaurants, some places will actually sell this whole thing at the store. This is one of my favorite vegetables. They grow on this long or this tall stalk, and these are very pretty. If you cut these, you can put these on vegetable displays or like a table display, and it's really neat. A lot of people have never seen that. So the main two ways to cook these, people will boil them or steam them, which is this down here. You see the color there. It's just like, here's the original color, and this is just like a brighter green, But what happens is when you steam these things, the sugars cook out of them. This one up here is my favorite way. This is like either pan sauteed or roasted. And they get this, cabbage has a ton of sugar content in it. And it has this really, really nice caramelization. Okay, cabbage, like I said, thick, waxy leaves on the outside. That's to protect it. So when it's in its form on the ground, it keeps bugs and stuff out of there because it has this thick outer waxy, almost rubbery leaf that's hard to get to penetrate, whereas the stuff inside is more tender. Some main things people probably like German style hot potato salad, where you cook their hot cabbage salad, vinegar, bacon, onion. This is used in a lot in Asian cuisine. And then coleslaw, that's one of the ones we think of, in America, is using cabbage for coleslaw. The reason people use this, it's very easy to grow. It's very hardy, so it doesn't get penetrated by bugs a lot because of that outer layer. It's very cheap. So you can use this as a bulk. If you buy egg rolls, a lot of Asian cuisine will use it for to bulk up their product, and you can throw it in the end. Like if you get a stir fry, there's always some sort of cabbage in there. Cauliflower, same thing. There's many different varieties of this. You can go to Meijer and get white, orange, green, purple. Just depends on what you want. And if you're using it for this is a typical crudité, as it said, where it's just raw vegetables. A lot of people don't recognize cauliflower from this. We're going to go over when we do cooking methods or applications. Cauliflower is used for so many things now, it's ridiculous. This is my favorite way to cook or to eat this, is roasted. It, like I said, as you can see, the browning, it brings out a lot of the natural sugars. Avocados, rich buttery flavor with dark leathery skin. You saw the video on, and this is one of the fruit vegetables, as they say, because you can plant this. I've actually planted these seeds and it'll grow something. So this is called a fruit vegetable. Serve with citrus to prevent browning. That's why, you always want to use this once. Don't use these unless, don't cut these until you're ready to use them, because they will turn really fast. And they don't have an offset flavor, but they're very unappealing when they turn that gray when they're in a bowl and they're not covered or have citrus on them. So typical thing, guacamole, people think of. People are using these now for all kinds of stuff. I've seen these are broiled, so they're cut in half and eggs added to it. Like you can see bacon. I've seen a lot of people put cheese on these. I've served these before. We cut them in half and put salsa inside, or like a marinara or tomato sauce of some sort, and then covered it with cheese and baked it, and then served it with something to scoop it out. Once we'll get into applications. Bell peppers, sweet, never spicy. These are also a fruit vegetable too, because they have seeds and they can be planted. And there's tons of different varieties. As you can see, this is called a bell pepper because it looks like a bell. Tons of different flavor profiles with these too. Like if you have a green pepper raw versus a red pepper, they taste completely different in my opinion. Chili peppers. These are in the same family as a bell pepper, but they're mild to very hot, and depending on where you are in the world, there's one pepper will remain king, wherever you live. And this is called the Scoville scale. Scoville scale is made because there's a chemical in peppers called capsaicin, which makes them very hot. So depending on the capsaicin level in a pepper is where it lands on the Scoville scale. And it changes yearly. This might be old. I think there's a ghost pepper or something now. There's one that's super, super hot. I don't really care. I've had different habaneros and Scotch bonnets. I haven't had any of the super duper hot ones now. I don't like it that hot. When you do handle these though, we'll get into applications with this, is make sure you always wear gloves. All right. Cucumbers, another fruit vegetable. This one picture over here is an English cucumber, also known as a seedless cucumber, because as you see in here, it has very minimal seeds, if any. And then the skin on this is not as leathery. This is very soft. These are good for serving raw or in salads. These types of cucumbers are great too. These are called pickling cucumbers, as you can see. Because, and when you buy these, it's called a pickling cucumber. It's basically a smaller cucumber that is picked at that size so they can be pickled. Because and they usually sell them where they're all like pretty much evenly the same size. And then the regular cucumber where it has the seeds in the middle. A lot of these use for pickles. And we'll go through the canning process when we talk about that later. All right. Another fruit vegetable is eggplant. This one, I wish I could do the applications, but that's another day. So there's two main types that I've worked with. There's this one, which is like a darker Mediterranean style eggplant. The skin on this one is very bitter until cooked, and then it turns sweet and actually changes color. This is typically looks like this, and sometimes you'll see them where they're like, looks like a grenade almost. This type of eggplant is called Japanese eggplant. It's got a longer, skinnier body, and it's a lot sweeter, and the skin is not as tough. I've used this before in different restaurants for Asian style food because you can fry it whole. It doesn't take as long to cook to get the bitterness out. These ones we'll go over. There's a long preparation for cooking those. And then tomatoes, the sky's the limit tomatoes, tons of different flavors, different types. These are the heirlooms, as we were talking about last week. Typically with heirloom tomatoes, they're not crossbred. So these are just heirloom seeds, which means they've been the same. They've never been changed forever. They're making a huge comeback just because of the flavor of them. A lot of times people, same thing with corn, which you'll see in a minute. Once people got this thought of, oh, a tomato's red, people would not buy the other colored tomatoes, even though they tasted just as good, or the sauce they wanted to make, they wanted it to be bright red. They didn't want these different color varieties in there. So what humans did was crossbreed these things to turn all the ones that they sold red. But when doing that, they took away from the quality of the actual tomato. This is summer squash. This is in the squash family, but summer. So this is your zucchini and yellow squash, mild, tender flavor. The reason these are the summer ones is because they're so tender that they will break down once it starts getting cold out. These are good. I know these are, people compete with these things and try to get the biggest squash in the world. Once these things get bigger than about 12 inches to 14 inches, they're not very good. So you can grow them till they're massive, but you're not supposed to. People do that so they're, like your neighbor can bring over the 30-pound squash and like, check this out. But they don't taste good. You want them here where they're still tender. And once again, we'll go through applications on these. When you look at these, you basically want to make sure there's no dents because they will dent easily and tear open. Make sure there's no bruises. And then once these vegetables are in a fridge too long, they'll start to shrivel up and wrinkle. So you don't want to keep them too long after that. Winter squash is this right here, your gourds and all that stuff. So that would be your pumpkin, spaghetti squash, banana, butternut squash. And typically people use them like this. So this is another thing that people grow to be as massive as possible. When you grow squash to eat, they call these pie pumpkins. So like this little tiny one right here, because they're not going to have that big hollow core. The bigger they grow, the core gets more hollow, which produces more seeds, so you can have more pumpkins. But the smaller ones are tender, or not tender, but once you cut into them, you can actually use those for cooking. So when you see canned pumpkin at the store for pumpkin pies and stuff, it's not those giant pumpkins. Like, you just can't use those. And if you think about how much that would cost, so it takes a long time for one of those giant pumpkins to grow. So that's why they sell them by the pound afterwards, whereas these little ones, probably take about 3 to 4 weeks. You can harvest them, and the vine will keep producing pumpkin. So you can, get a lot more use out of it. All right, green leafy vegetables. So hundreds of varieties, 4 main groups. You have butterhead, small, round, loosely formed heads, buttery texture, which is this right here. A lot of these are those living lettuces you see in the container at the grocery store. Crisp head, light green leaves, mild flavor. Leaf lettuce, which is like your, I wish there was a picture on here, like green leaf lettuce, red leaf lettuce. They're in a form of a head, but they're not as firm. And then you have romaine, which is the most flavorful, which is this one right here, which is formed in a head, but it's a lot more stiff. Like the ribs of this, the ribs are this part right here, this middle spine part, and that's what holds it together. And then we'll go through purchasing these, and you can cook a lot of these too, and what salads they're used for. Green leafy vegetables, those are your cooking greens. So kale, which, the baby kale you can eat raw, but the adult mature kale, collard greens, mustard greens, these also have different cooking styles, and cleaning is very important with these. These are very dirty, and if you take a mustard green versus like a collard, the leaf of itself has a longer cooking time depending on what you're doing. If you have this one right here, or even kale, you can cook that in like 5 to 10 minutes, so it's still got a nice firm texture, but you can bite through it. Collard, you need to cook a lot longer because it has to break down the leaf. Spinach, same thing. You can use this for many different applications. You could eat it raw. There's baby spinach, there's curly spinach, depending on what you're wanting to use for. More green leafy vegetables, Swiss chard, type of beet without the root is what it's described as. And then wide dark leaves with different colored stalks. And then you want to shop for this one, which we'll get into, is like make sure the leaves are not wrinkled around the edges and there's no eaten spots in there from bugs. And this is another one you cook. So depending on the application you want to do with it, the more you cook this, the more this color will change. So you want to think of some sort of finishing with this and cooking it lightly so it still has that bright color in there. All right, spring greens and field greens. Oh, okay, and field mixes, that's what it is. Okay, so some of these are spring greens, field mixes, which is going to be on the next page. Lettuces, cabbages, and radicchio. Radicchio is this red lettuce up here that you see a lot in like the bagged lettuces. This will be shredded up, but a lot of times people don't understand this has like a bitter flavor to it, but you can cook these things. If it has a firm texture, if you can cook it right on the grill, and I've had this cooked before in like several different ways, and it takes on a very, very good flavor. And it does not, if you've only had like head lettuce or iceberg, as they call it, like the green one that's real cheap at the grocery store, that has one application. You can eat it with a salad. Not a whole lot of nutritional value. And the way that works is the darker and more colorful a vegetable is, the more nutritional value it has. The lighter in color, the less nutritional value. Spring greens, field greens, mesclun greens. That's what this is when you see those at the store. And these are usually just called baby greens. So here's like, if you look in here, there's chicory, there's dandelion greens, there's little pieces of Bibb lettuce, there's mini, oh God, I just said it. It's gonna drive me nuts. Oh, mini chard. But there's all these different ones, oak leaf. So that's what this is. And they come in these different ones. They call it a spring mix, a field mix, a mesclun mix. This mesclun one's got the most flavorful items in there. So arugula, which is very spicy, watercress, chive, sorrel. Depending on what you're serving this with, if you have a cream-based salad dressing, you want to go with like a field mix, which is like your lighter flavors. If you're using a vinaigrette or something with a lot of tart to it, you want to go for this one, the mesclun, because it's going to have a lot of different flavored bitter greens in there too to kind of counterbalance what you're doing. So this is the one you'd want to use for like a heavy balsamic, blue cheese, candied nuts, that kind of thing. All right, so seed vegetables, but you got your beans, green beans and yellow wax beans. Some beans are removed from pods, usually soaked or boiled before cooking. These have many applications too, and we'll watch a video on how to cook and prepare these in different varieties. Corn. This is what Americans think of for corn, like typically now. The yellow corn, not even these white specks in there, and sweet corn. Most of the corn we use here in the States, a lot of it gets exported, and a lot of it is feed corn. If you see some of these cornfields you drive past in Indiana, that is not sweet corn you see on the plate. That is feed corn that is left on there till it's rock hard, and then it's used to feed pigs and other animals or ground up. Traditional corn, this is kind of like your heirloom corn down here. It's not all the same color, and it's naturally like that. But Americans, we didn't want to see different colors on there. We want to see all the same color on there. So they'd crossbreed this and pretty much get rid of the colored, the different varieties and just have this solid yellow, because that's what people like. They want it super sweet and they want it solid yellow. Another thing they use for this is popcorn. So then that's a certain type. All right, and then the last one are your peas, okay? Of these three varieties, these peas are the ones you see in the can where you split these, or you open this isn't a split pea, but you open this, take the peas out of the pod. These are English style, and then cook the peas separately. These ones are used, typically you could either cook these whole. If you see there's a string on this one side that you need to pull out, or that's going to be hard as a rock. Not hard as a rock, but it's basically like having a piece of dental floss stuck in the middle of your food. These are typically, that is stripped, and then these are sliced and used for different styles of Asian cooking. And then these ones are very soft and tender. You can cut the tips of these off, and these can be served raw. They're very sweet. It's like your snow pea. And then, I think that's a snow pea. And then served as is, okay? So yeah. And then tomorrow, we're gonna start roots and tubers, okay? Okay, so there's one video I did want you guys to see because it was pretty good. This is different types of broccoli. Oh, oops. Oh, it's not working. Dang. Oh, here we go.
I'm Adam Hickman from the Time Inc. Food Studios. I wanted to teach you a little bit about buying broccoli at the store. You've got several options now, and it's not just regular broccoli like this. This costs about $2.39 for 4 of these crowns put together. You typically eat the top part. You can eat the stems here, but they're pretty fibrous and tough, and you can either puree them into a soup or slice them really, really thin. But this is what you think of typically. Broccoli rabe. It's also called rapini. It's really, really leafy. You can see all these little bits on the top here. It looks just like broccoli, but this actually tastes more like turnip greens than it does broccoli. It's really, really, really bitter. And you gotta balance it out with some sugar or lemon or something like that, just so that it's a little bit more palatable. Let's move on to my favorite. This is called broccolini. It's also called sweet baby broccoli, and it's my favorite because it's really, really, really tender. You can eat these stems. You kind of treat it more like it's asparagus than you do like your standard broccoli. To me, it's kind of like a special occasion thing, but only at $3.79. It's really not that expensive, and you can eat the whole thing. It's easy to cook, and it is my go-to. So you got broccolini, broccoli rabe, or rapini, and just your standard broccoli crowns. Next time you go to the store, just give them a try and see if you like them.
All right, and with that, with what he's saying, price-wise, the one regular broccoli was like $2.39. The broccoli or the broccolini was about $1 more a pound. But when you're looking at that, when you buy one of those giant heads of broccoli, you cut off the florets, and the main weight of that is going to be the stalk. So that is called your yield. So you're like, oh, this is really cheap. But after you get your part, here's your edible portion over here, then there's a massive pile of what you cannot eat. You got to think. So I paid $4 for this, and I have, a pound. But once you take off your, 7 ounces of actual broccoli, you just paid how much now per pound? Like you paid that much, you paid $4 for this little pile. Whereas the other stuff, you're paying $4 and you can eat the whole thing. So that's where your yield is. Same thing with like a carrot. You have a whole carrot. Say it cost you $1. All right. So you're like, oh, I got a whole carrot for $1. But once you peel that whole thing, cut the ends off and cut it up, now you have 70% of your carrot left. So now that 70% is your edible yield. And that is what cost you $1 because you're not going to use the rest of that. So that's a whole different lesson. All right. So that is your start for vegetables today. And I will see you guys later.